Hello and welcome. Today will be a bit different because I'm not trying to beat Millennia again because yesterday I finally beat her. Yay! Except I was completely muted the entire time. Not as fun. But today I will be continuing at the easiest difficulty of this game to try to unlock all the characters because two more basic classes, one that needs two more keys, so that will be done in the next run. And the gunslinger, which I've found the character or the requirement to do the upgrade. I'm hoping that I can get a gun, get the character that gives the item to do the upgrade, so that I can actually unlock the last classes. This one, which will then let me work towards, which will let me get the deprived, and then the doppelganger, and then I'll have all the classes. First, I will go with this character, but the reason I'm playing this game is because so far it's fairly straightforward with minimal like complexity, so I don't really need to focus too much on other stuff, allowing for more like less forgetting what I'm saying in the middle of saying it because like the boss suddenly I'm about to beat them or whatever. So today I'm gonna start by talking about just sort of finally beating Millennia. It was, I think it's a good fight, but it is a major pain. Parent, I don't think I want that. It might be good, but after finally beating the boss and then choosing to go with the incantation that I expected to be bad, and then tested briefly and found was probably pretty bad. After doing that, I'm like finally done with that, and I can continue with the game, getting further. What I'm going to do next when I next play it, which I think I'll probably try to keep it here just for the sake of potential consistency. But my plans are I'll probably try to do that on the weekend. And just whenever it's the weekend, I'm not going to bother as much with maintaining my attempt at always talking about books. Just sort of to have a clear differentiator doing it on the weekend instead. Because I still want to talk about books, but if I'm playing Elden Ring, a game that actually has a lot going on when you're exploring, it'll be hard to just talk about wholly unrelated topics the entire time. So I'm gonna shift that. But yeah, that's gonna be weekends, probably mixed in with other stuff, obviously, but that's my plan. I'll probably play this for a little while though. Not on the weekend, but in general, because it's actually very I want to say simple. It's not really fair, but yeah, in the tavern is where there's a dude who, for like 30 gold, lets you get what is like an illegal gun part that I assume is what's required to get that upgrade, the next upgrade for your gun to get it to 4. But anyway, what I'm going to talk about now is going back to what I had, talked to myself about yesterday, which I was mostly focusing on how the day before I'd started to talk about like genres of books, but then I barely talked about even one. I'm not going to talk about the same stuff I did yesterday exactly because I can't remember exactly what I said, and because for me, repeating it the very next day would be repetitive. But what I am actually, I can talk about one of the things I talked about yesterday because it's a simple enough topic, which was the relatively growing um type of like category of light novels, or the genre of light novels that is emphasizing misunderstandings and talking about how sort of what I find works well about those, as well as talking about one or two that I have read that I especially like within the genre. Which, so starting with the initial just discussion of the genre as a whole, I find that it's I mentioned talked yesterday. It heavily, I believe, emphasizes sort of it relies on what is bait. I don't know if it's technically dramatic irony because I don't know if dramatic irony has to it has a requirement of like acting and not just whether it requires like a stage play or a movie. I assume it doesn't, but the genre is entirely or mostly based around the dramatic irony which arises from the generally the main character sort of it can be they misunderstand how other people view them, or they they rarely understand how others view them, but sometimes the emphasis is placed more on um, just how others view them. That's the more important element, as opposed like some it stresses that, but the key point is always the lack of understanding and the problems that it causes. Though most of the time, oh, I never knew these sped up. Most of the time, these types of stories don't, that I've read at least, don't take themselves exceedingly seriously, which has which works well when it's purely emphasizing comedy, because at a basic level, that miscommunication, when it isn't high stakes, is fun. It's not like the peak of literature or anything, but it is straightforward. It's straightforward, it's simple and uncomplicated. That's really good. I've never seen that yet. And some of these stories, I find, make use of the misunderstandings in a slightly more interesting way than others, with some emphasis being placed on like the misunderstanding being multiple layers. Like the one example that I know about is what a series that is being actively translated by J Novel Club, that is what Let This Grieving Soul Retire, where it for the misunderstanding component of the story, it highly focuses on it focuses on the fact that both sides of the story are misunderstanding the situation, because the main character is, for all that there is absolute evidence, he is incredibly incompetent, but because of a exceedingly consistent string of good luck, they've managed to uh, always everything just works out for them, and has led to them having an exceedingly they have an excellent reputation as never being wrong and sort of knowing more than anyone else, having tricks up their sleeve for every situation, and basically having foresight. But another element to the story that works well is it isn't entirely clear. I have no idea what this does. Whether or not the character actually might have some sort of like special power, just because in the most recent part they have a dream that could be construed as foresight. And this foresight could also connect to just the non-stop good luck that the character has, and it that keeps it open that maybe the only person it's possible. I wouldn't get assume either way at this stage in the story, but at the point the story is now, the misunderstanding could just be on the main character's part. And that having the main character misunderstand is not uncommon. Like it's fairly common, but having it be a story where the main character might be misunderstanding and everyone else has the more accurate grasp of the situation is a more it is an interesting idea, because it leaves a lot of room for like a sudden change that could arise. Now, my bet is it's probably just happenstance, random luck, because that's sort of how these stories generally tend to go. But the way it has been written, it leaves it open for that to be for it to be the case, that it isn't just complete baseless luck. It is some sort of foresight that they have that is sort of channeled unknowingly. Um, Shop, probably worth checking. I don't know what secret rooms really are. Armor. I don't have armor. Oh, it still costs money. That's a helmet. I'd rather keep that. But having that option open is interesting. The other component of that story that's less specific to it being a misunderstanding centric story, making use of like the misunderstanding tag or whatever you want to call it, is how the story begins with another alternate premise of, oh, he's part of a super adventurers party, but he gets, in other stories, like, oh, he gets kicked out because he's weaker than everyone else. And how it feels is, it's this, I think, is a great way to sort of riff on that, because what I also talked about yesterday briefly was how, maybe it was the day before, is how often like these novels attempt to sort of poke fun at existing tropes, and their goal is to, you know, make something new that pokes fun at the tropes while being better, but frequently it just ends up with a story that checks the boxes. But this story doesn't, the way this is, it is introduced is, it doesn't just check off boxes, it keeps it fairly unique, with like the main character knows that he is significantly less competent and attempts to leave because otherwise he's confident that he would die. And but his friends don't let him because they care deeply for him, which admittedly is, that's sort of one of the weaker parts of the story. Can I try one more time before I give up? And then wait for a new tavern. I don't think the guy is here. No. I'll just buy another beer or two. Let's just buy one more here. Shoot. Let's go. Yeah, stop there. And back on topic. He wants to leave. His friends won't let him. And because of that, he's forced to do whatever he can to just sort of get by. And like his methods are questionable, but it always just works out because that's the type of story it is. And as part of that, he becomes like the best. I think they use the term hunter and not adventurer, but he's the best hunter, or one of the top hunters of his generation. And like part of that, all stems from him just trying to get by. Oh, cool. Did that? Oh, I got a +4. Shoot. Okay. If I'd known about that, I would have definitely had the money gun equipped, because that would have been an easy way. Okay, that's good to know. Though honestly, as an actual weapon, I want to use this gun's way better, but To unlock the character, I need that. But back on my intended topic. It does a good job of that as a misunderstanding type of story. And so I think it's one of the better ones that I've read. And it, alongside all the others, it doesn't, the other ones that I've read that are good, in my opinion, it never tries too hard to be overly serious. It doesn't try very hard to justify everything that just sort of works out. Because that's not an element of the story. Because if there was a clear justification for everything just working out, which there might be eventually, if it's like, oh, he's actually blessed by a god of luck or whatever silly reason. Like, that's possible and it could be funny, because that would be a twist on the expected of there is no explanation, and that would inherently be... What does this do? It would inherently just be a joke, because the expectation is always that it won't... Oh, cool. The expectation is always that there's no real justification for this extreme success or whatever. Of course, sometimes it is sort of justified, but that's a different type of story. Which the type of story that is, that type where there is a justification for the strength is a very different style, because for one example, it's one that I think has been within the context, it is well known. Like, I think it's His Eminence in the Shadow, or The Eminence in the Shadow, or something, where it's about an individual who is obsessed with the, like, man behind the cloth or whatever, where the actual person controlling everything is hidden and unknown. And then in the real world, he trains until he gets, hit by a car or a truck or whatever, which leaning clearly into the isekai trope of getting hit by a truck sending you to another world. But like, this story emphasizes that it's not, it plays that part straight and doesn't try to riff on it, because that's not the focus. And it's not a real negative to the story, because it's just not an important thing. Like, oh, he was reincarnated. That's just to establish justification for the character to then become uber strong, but not believe that he is actually some super successful at his goal. He doesn't realize that all his random guesses all along have been correct. And that's just sort of the most base. I think it's a fun story. I got bored of it after a while, but it is the most basic type of misunderstanding centric story where everyone else sees the character as excellent and they are correct. But the main character, I mean, well, in this it's a little bit more iffy if they're actually amazing because most of the stuff stems from pure chance. Like, oh, their hideout is right here, despite having no basis and it's always correct because it's that type of story. But they are super strong and competent, which results in let's get rid of the boomerang. Which results in success. But they're super strong, but they aren't properly aware of their relative competence. Though admittedly, they are kind of aware that they are strong, but they aren't fully aware that all of their random guesswork has been correct the entire time. And and what works here is that they work to convince themselves that despite everyone in their mind playing along with his sort of attempt at playing a, what is it? Oh, but attempting to play as a shadow organization. Sorry, I need to find. I don't think it's these. No, this is a potion seller joke. I mean, that would be useful. Sure. Who's this dude? Okay, I need to get the one character. None of them. Okay, I'll do a couple more. I don't think it's any of these people. This guy's a joke. Gambling addict. He shows up there the one time I saw him, but I'm pretty sure he doesn't look like that. Try with one last time. Okay, no, let's do one of these. Let's do two of these. Just okay. Ah. Oh, cool. That's a cool mechanic. But yes, these misunderstanding type stories that have become seemingly much more popular in the last few years, which again are sort of, it isn't really a whole genre, it's more of a style because it's sort of frequently they will be like part of the isekai genre, but then the misunderstandings occur within that. But it is still a compelling style of story to me, and I'm glad it has had some success because despite pretty objectively being kind of basic, it is at least straightforward. And what I personally find to be the biggest boon for it is that they don't regularly take themselves seriously. And by not taking itself too seriously, it makes it far more accessible when it just is silly or unbelievable. Because the moment it tries too hard to be like, oh, this character is exceptional when it's all luck, if they play the character, if the character is written as the author thinks they're some great person when everything is pure luck, it gets frustrating. But a lot of these stick with, no, they're just a goofball, which is a compelling type of character for this, like, jokey type of story. Yeah, that's one of the genres that's pretty fun. That's been, well, genres, styles of book that have, I feel, grown relatively recently. Okay, that's maxed out. Good. Yeah, that genre's success has been pretty fun. Well, that style of light novels success has been fun. But I can talk about next might be more broad and sort of. Actually, maybe I could talk briefly about sort of what is to me the appeal of, like, or the elements that I find differentiate, like, Western novels with a lot of the relatively odd, like, Japanese, Korean, primarily the Japanese and Korean novels, because there's a there's a very distinct difference in how they feel when you read them, and that's what sort of has drawn me to them more recently, as in the last, like, half decade, over finding a new Western novel, because I've already read so many that have the same, fairly same style. Like, what? Now, admittedly, this could be a difference between books written and targeted at young adults or adults, as opposed to books that are targeted at young adults to children, but or children to young adult range. Because I imagine many light novels are probably much more akin to the Hunger Games YA target demographic, as opposed to the target demographic of, I have to get another infusion, as opposed to the target demographic of Lord of the Rings is not a good example, but like Game of Thrones, or which I've never read because it's still not done, and I'm not going to even try to read it until it's fully released. But uh, until the difference in target demographic might account for my the change in my impression. Sure, because because what I read a lot has been stuff that's more targeted towards, oh yeah, targeted towards that demographic of Game of Thrones, whichever Brandon Sanderson books and such. And since that's just a different target demo, that might be where the biggest differences stem from. So it may be that if I read different like non-light novels, but those have probably less translation incentive because they're less likely to have some more readily accessible other forms of media translated just by virtue of mass appeal. But I don't know. I don't know enough about the literature world of Japan or Korea. They definitely have other, like, more serious writing, but I don't know how they read. I assume they also read a fair bit differently because their sort of the culture is different, so the reference points will vary a good deal. But it's difficult to specifically describe the difference in feeling, but there is a lot of stuff that is sort of omnipresent in Japanese and Korean light novel type books that don't exist in Western books that aren't clearly attempting to replicate the same style. That could be good. But that, let's just see how this goes really quick. Versus, yeah, this seems better. But there are clear differences, and it all just reference points. But honestly, I actually can't even begin to describe the difference because I myself can't be like, oh, this is what I enjoy. It's a different tone, and you can often tell whether or not something is. Ah, there it is. Allows you to choose a trait to remove, then select a new trait. Cool. Requires 6 traits to be used. So I might use that just before death. Do I even want to? Infusion permanent, first damage. Actually, that would be useful to take out later, but more damage. I don't think I want to change it. Okay. I really need AoE. But what I might talk about as per actually, I could probably spend a little bit of time. Ugh. Most duplicates ever. Let's go here. Let's just use up my last key. But I could talk a bit about some Korean light novels. Well, I don't know if they're technically called light novels. I don't know what the specific term is. Same as like manga is not. I want to see what this looks like. Oh, that's cool. Like in Korea, manga is like manhwa. It's a different name entirely. I don't know if they're called light novels in Korea or not. Well, same as there's no like light novels in like North America. But the there's not many that I can remember off the top of my head that I've read because I haven't read that many, and I think there's a few that I've attempted to read and then not finish because they just sort of burnt out a little. But ones that I have read through fan translations because there was no official translation. I've read and finished. Oh, it's like. Oh, it's funny that I can't even remember the name of it, but it's related to shadows. Oh, I actually can't remember what it's called. Um, but I've read it a few times because it's fairly easy to read and it's not overly, it doesn't take itself too seriously, and it has interesting, actually, what appeals to me the most about the Korean novels that I've attempted to read and read are, I find they do a good job of having mechanisms within the story that are at least unique enough that there's an appeal to them. And yes, it was the one that I was thinking of was Solo Leveling, which I think is relatively well known within context. And like it's not the world's greatest piece of literature, but it does do a pretty good job of like keeping it interesting with the rules that it builds for its story and its characters and the strength gain, the mechanisms through which the main character gains strength. Like I mean, the fundamental leveling up and no one else can is pretty overdone. But one thing that saves it to me, oh yeah, this is the Megadeth, I think. So I actually shouldn't have gone for the stuff that made it Megadeth because I'm just doing this. My goal was just to unlock the characters. So doing Megadeth when I'm not going to be anywhere near strong enough is not going to work out well. Okay, no, okay. I mean, other than the fact they have a ton of HP, this attack's pretty free. I got hit there somehow. Probably not going to be able to clear this, but if I do, hey, that'd be good. Okay, the AoE on that is kind of iffy. The more he does this, the better. But solo leveling, sort of, here's a relatively major spoiler. What sort of, I think, helps with the, oh, he's the only one who can level up factor is that technically he isn't actually leveling up. He's just sort of releasing a artificial limitation imposed on him so that he didn't. Okay, that's super weird. So that he didn't like, so that he could properly adjust, which it might not work in the context of reality, but if you play any like video game where you get skills over time. I'm gonna die. I can't. Oh, actually, if I have the revive thing, that helps a lot. I actually have a chance now. Okay, the more he does this phase, the better. Oops, I messed up. Okay, I got hit and I died. Wait, but what's the can't... whatever. That was closer than I was expecting, considering it wasn't even that good of a run. But what solo leveling does that I think works well... Oh, here's a character. What it does well with the leveling is it doesn't require... Like, he's not actually leveling up, quote unquote. He is simply... Oh, so this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Okay, so I don't actually get the gunslinger to get the doppelganger. That's good. Let's try a different type of class. Let's go with this guy who wants armor. So, but he doesn't level. He just releases a weakness and becomes stronger, which is at least semi-compelling compared to just being a, oh, I can level up because I can level up. But it also sort of goes kind of crazy at the end, which is pretty fun. Like, if it didn't go quite as crazy at the end, it wouldn't be quite as memorable to me. But that's a fun one. There's also... another one that I've read is a monster who levels up. There's a running theme here. But what I find fun about this is it started with a fairly common premise. Oh, they're actually a monster, not a human. And sort of... It went... Unlike a lot of these stories, it did actually justify this unique element. Where, like, the reason he is... I have no idea what this does. I give up. Let's just try it. The reason he is special, spoilers, is because technically his father or whatever wasn't actually human. They were a sort of monster human creature in a world where there are like vampires and stuff. It wasn't a purely human society. But there is justification for his oddity, which many of these types of stories don't bother justifying. And so that's compelling to me. From a reading it again perspective. Because that only is revealed like 70% of the way through or something. Neat. And so, what these two have in common is the world that is built at least has some has unique mechanics, is sort of how I view them, which I find, if the author doesn't create a story that is sort of by itself unique and noteworthy, if they at least have a decently interesting mechanics to the world, then it's at least a fun read. It might not be a deep, thought-provoking book to read, but it will at least be fun enough to be like, hey, what if this happened within the story? I really don't want to get poisoned, but like, it's... these stories put that weird the emphasis on the mechanics, and that to me saves a lot of them, because if they didn't have the interesting sort of mechanics behind them, the stories are generally kind of subpar to me, because they have I think they always have some form of romance, but the romance is always very, I'll say, one-sided, where it's like for some reason the female lead is into the male lead despite not really knowing them in any meaningful way. And this can quickly, it just leads to very shallow relationships, which, I mean, it's not the emphasis of these stories, so it's fine. It's good enough, sort of, but I mean, it doesn't need to be there in the first place. But it's a common theme where they always have a pretty mediocre romance as part of it. But the fact that the romance is mediocre does not tend to ruin the story, because the romance is not a key part. It is always there, and it is sort of just to tick off a box because people want it, but that's because it generally doesn't feel as forced. I mean, it still feels forced, the relationships, because there's never any natural character growth. And the a monster who levels up, or whatever it's called, does it, I would say, the worst of many, because it's like, oh, he has a wolf form, and what are wolves known for? Scent. And it plays heavily into that, and the relationship is a pretty creepy. But I would say that the way that the story ends sort of keeps, like how it ends is pretty fun. I don't love the ending, but it's at least an interesting ending, which is more than some stories get. So an interesting ending is at least a plus mark. And the mechanics in the story are not super duper duper unique, but it at least has some elements that are not just copied from every single other story of its type that I've read. There's probably many that it came before. There could be many that came before that had the exact same stuff, but sure. But it's not the best story, but it's fine. It's I'd say a fairly common issue. Wait, oh, that's fun. And this sort of works out how it does. This is good DPS. But ooh, that has potential. And that's definitely what I'm taking. I see this fun looking. I think that's one of the and it actually goes where I aim. That's super good. Okay, this is one of the things that's really appealed to me about this. There's a lot of weapons that are kind of similar, but they all have something that makes them at least reasonably unique within. Oh yeah, these purple things curse. I'm gonna die because I'm not paying any attention. More armor. Like the way that this is I died. The way that this weapon works is very similar to the other, like the mage ones where you attack where you aim. But it has a different way it travels, different way it actually hits, and it's cool looking. It's part of it too. Yeah. I think my plan, I'm probably gonna stop after this run, just because today's been kind of weird and I don't really have anything I could think of to talk about. But tomorrow, I will either continue with the Minecraft world that I started last week and then didn't play again, or I press space and dash, or I will play Elden Ring because I want to beat Elden Ring so that I can go and play other, like Dark Souls 3 is my main goal because I actually want to finish that game. But I want to finish Elden Ring so that I don't have to relearn relatively basic muscle memory that I would absolutely lose very quickly. What is this? This is Berserker Potion. Attack speed, good. Yeah, I mean, sure. Yeah, since my plan is to, on the weekends, just sort of talk about whatever. Might not be this, it might be focusing on talking about the game as I go. That might be good. That's probably better. Or safer. Because I only have two, that'd be 20%. And I haven't gotten a single chance to get more. But yeah, if I want to play, you know, I don't actually feel like this is a good idea. Uh, it's just gamble away everything, you know? Like the correct decision is always just waste your money. I kind of just want to see what it might pay out with eventually. Or if it will be like, hey, stop gambling. That would be pretty funny. You gave me one bomb. Neat. Get money. But yeah, since I felt like on Thursday, I felt like actually doing anything complicated in Minecraft would be difficult while talking, while attempting to speak for an extended period of time about a topic. It was difficult to maintain concentration on both, and Minecraft is not super simple. All that. So it like because it just kind of devolved into mining the same thing for a long time. So like maybe if I just get into a position where just going strip mining for a while is worthwhile, then I'll do it on the weekdays and talk about other, like, try to talk about books at the same time. But, oh shoot, I'm dumb. I give up. Let's do this. Oh yes, boss. That's a weird boss. This is not going well. Like, I mean, it's only 4 or 5, but la, la. It's not been a fun run because I haven't gotten a weapon that's actually like appealing. Like the fact that this slow feeling weapon is the only one that I've found that's like felt any good is not a great bait. I need keys. Let's just hope I get a fun weapon. Okay, this has a chance to. One of these could be a fun weapon. I kind of want to go for that. 4 times, 5% per stack. Nothing interesting. 3, 4, 3. Okay. I just have so much int. I haven't gotten any strength all game. Like this would be a better choice from a pure. Why not? Let's just go with this. I give up. Oh no, that was the wrong choice. Oh well. It was absolutely the wrong choice to pick these. Because they are contingent on like a sweet spot, though. Hitting with only one isn't the end of the world. I mean, these are pretty strong at least. I can use money. I mean, food. Increased effect. Wait, that. I mean, it's better than this. Is this the sketchy dude? Souls for gold. Interesting. Bomb guy. Okay, so this is the gambler. Let's just sell some stuff, whatever. I should have gone for the keys, actually, but... It's fine. But... You know what, since I've already lost the point of talking primarily about books, let's talk about something totally unrelated. Let's talk about food. Because, I mean, there's a lot of fun food that exists, and, you know, almost everyone likes food. I have to say that one of my personal favorite types of food that is pretty good is shawarma. Which, like, is such a simple. Okay, I hate when they just naturally run faster. I have to dash to run away. But it's good. I've had some bad shawarma that was just dry and immensely unsatisfying to eat, but most that I've eaten has been pretty good in like a few areas. But other food, I learned a few years ago that apparently some people don't even know what dim sum is. And like, I'm not from a Chinese family at all. So the reason that I know what dim sum is because my mom had multiple roommates who were from, or they or their parents were from China. So they had dim sum presumably with them, and that led to them liking dim sum and finding a place in our city that does good dim sum. And it surprised me that people either didn't know what it was, that there are people who don't know what it is, or who don't like it because I mean, not liking it is odd to me because it's just specific Chinese food. And like, there's so little wrong with relatively generic Chinese food. Like, like Chinese food's just very good. There's definitely some that's kind of odd in a less appealing way. Like the one that's to me mostly just a waste of time. Chicken feet is just what's the point? It's just chicken skin. It's like it's nice, but it's like you can get chicken skin in better forms than on the bony feet of a chicken. And it's also kind of weird as like a pseudo breakfasty, lunchy food because starting off with like a very fatty, well, you wouldn't eat it first, of course, but like starting off with that's kind of starting the day eating that is just kind of a recipe for, oh shoot, oh okay, that's where all my souls are going. That's so bad. Yeah, like obviously there's places in the world where there just isn't a sufficient population of people from China to maintain like relatively authentic like dim sum because I mean some places just don't have a ton of immigration or proximity. But when like when people who live in like similar areas to where I do and grew up, it surprised me that they could have just never tried it because it's such a great, what did I get hit by? I wasn't paying any attention. It's just such a great kind of way to, you don't quite start the day, but you sort of start the day with it because you don't really, if you're gonna have dim sum, you're not gonna want to eat breakfast beforehand because then you can't eat as much. But yeah, it's a good type of food. Sure. Okay, useless. I'd rather have the armor. I don't want to die. I'm not gonna use it if I get it. I got hit because that spears get stuck in the wall and I forget it does every time. I'm gonna die, which is fine because I kind of want to. Oh, this enemy. This enemy is absolutely taken from Enter the Gungeon. Like, it's not quite the same, but it's okay. I don't know what was homing, but well, no, I saw it homing. I didn't dodge, but I didn't know what was homing. I didn't know those whichever enemy that was shot homing shots like that. But there's where I stopped today. Talked a bunch. It has been positive. I'm glad I can turn these off. It's fun, but I only have 3 more upgrades and a bunch of gifts to unlock. Yeah. This is where I'm stopping for today. And tomorrow will probably be earlier in the day. No one needs to know that really, but yes. Goodbye.